Welcome to our class on Chassidus. We're going to be learning a beautiful Chassidic discourse in the Rebbe. The name of the Chassidic discourse is called Chabad Hashem Amoi. The Rebbe said this Chassidic discourse in Shabbos Parshas Haazinu, that year was the 13th day of the month of Tishrei, in the year Tov Shin Lamed Beis, exactly 56 years ago. So again, the Chassidic discourse is based on the verse in this week's Torah portion where it says, Chabad Hashem Amoi Yaakov Chevel Nachlosoi. A part of Hashem is his people. Yaakov is his inheritance. So the Rebbe asks the question: why does we have the double expression Chelek Hashem Amoi? Part of Hashem is his people, and then Yaakov the Chevel Nachlosoi. Yaakov is part of the strand from the inheritance from Hashem. Also, why in the beginning does it say Amoi the nation, and afterwards it says Yaakov? Also in the beginning it says Chelek Hashem, referring to Yud Kei Vav Kei, and then it says Chevel Nachlosoi. Also we have to understand what it says afterwards. The verse continues on, it says Yimtze'ehu Beretz Midbar, he found him in the desert. Now we know the land of the desert, and like it's explained at length in the Alter Rebbe's Chassidic discourse, is referring to what? It's referring to the animal soul. So how can you say in the same sentence of Chelek Hashem Amoi, which is referring to the soul, which is a part of God, is found the Eretz Midbar with the Nefesh Bahamas? And especially, like it's explained in the Zohar, which is also brought down and explained in the classical Chassidic discourses of the Oira Torah, that the Midbar, a desert, is a land of the snakes and the scorpions and the fire, etc. And that's the place where what dwells over there is the three impure klipot. So how can you say that the soul is on such a low level? Also, what does the mean Yimtze'ehu? It's found over there. In other words, found means it's just haphazardly it's found there. But the fact, as we know, the souls of the Jewish people is a part of God. And like we say in the blessings in the morning, Neshama, the soul, Shenasatami, that you gave me, Tahirahi, it's pure. Ata Barasa, you created it, Ata Yitzarta, Nafachtabi, you blew it into its nostrils, and you watch it. So what's it mean? It's found. It's not found, we're part of Hashem. Also, it says afterwards, Kanesher Yoyir Kinoi, and it's explained in many places that the idea of a kinesher, like an eagle with a chaf before the word nesher, was referring to intense, huge compassion. In Hebrew it's called rachamim rabim, higher than even kinesher. That's why it's kinesher. It's higher, much greater compassion, and even higher than the nesher that's in the chariot, which is basically referring to compassion above ishtalshel. So what's the question is, what does that mean? Okay. We're going to understand this in introduction, what's explained before in a different Chassidic discourse, in reference to the soul coming down into this world. That when the soul comes down here to transform the world, why does it come down here? It's coming here to transform the sparks of the world of Tohu. We know that when Hashem originally created the world, there was Tohu, there was chaos, and there was a lot of sparks that went into the world. So the soul is coming down here to elevate those sparks that fell when there was what we call the breaking of the vessels. There was too much light in the vessels and it broke. So there's holy sparks, and we're down here to elevate those holy sparks. So again, to be clear, what the Rebbe is saying is that we came down here to elevate the sparks of Tohu that are all over the place. Why do we have to elevate those sparks? Because the sparks of Tohu are very, very high. Why? Now the question is, why is the sparks of Tohu very, very high? Because the power that the world of Tohu has is one word, bittul, acceptance, self-nullification, on the highest level. So the real power, if you want to know what's Tohu, what's the world of Tohu? Tohu, the essence of Tohu is 100% bittul. So if you want to appreciate and connect to that world, it all comes through the idea of bittul, of acceptance. And like he explained before, the difference between the world of Tohu, which we call the world of chaos, and the world of tikkun, which things are law and order, is that the world of Tohu is on the level of, I'll say it in Hebrew, I'll translate behema, an animal. And the world of tikkun is in the level of an adam, a human being. And that's why it says in the verse, Adam behema teshri Hashem. There's two different levels. Adam is referring to the world of tikkun, and behema is the world of Tohu. Now, even though you're going to say, 1 second, the fact is, on a literal level, what's higher, a human being or an animal? The fact is, a human being is much higher than an animal. But however, when it comes to this one point, which is called bittul, acceptance, an animal is a much higher. They have a much greater level of acceptance. And how do we see that? Because we see that this level of acceptance is more found in an animal, is because what's acceptance? Acceptance is connected to Shem Ma. Ma is the ultimate bittul. You ask, what is it? And like it says in the Torah, V'nachnu Ma, what are we? Ma is the highest level of acceptance. And what is the idea of Shema? And that which is acceptance, where is that revealed most? In the name of a behemoth. What's a behemoth called? Behemoth. So the last two letters in behemoth is memhe, which is acceptance in a revealed state. However, in Adam, it doesn't say memhe. There's an aleph, there's a dal, there's no memhe. And like to explain, Alter explains at length in Shar Yichud V'Emunah that a name that something is called, that actually gives it its energy. That gives it existence. So obviously, if you have the name Ma in behemoth, that is the energy of an animal. And the essence of an animal is all about acceptance. And that's why we see that in the word behema, which is for the animal, you have the letters memhe, which is acceptance in a revealed state. Because it knows the behema spelled beis hey, memhe. And that's why it's on a literal level. Because the fact is, an animal has more acceptance than a human being. Human being thinks, we have to analyze, you have to understand that behema, whatever you tell it to do, it just does. It's more accepting. It doesn't struggle so much intellectually. However, when it comes to a human being, which is also called an Adam, and why we call it an Adam? It's a very powerful idea, because Adam comes from the word of Adam, compared to Hashem. But the fact is that the name Adam, which is basically made up of three letters, Aleph, Daleth, Mem, is actually two words, Aleph and Dam. What is the Aleph? Aleph, we know, is referring to Hashem, the creator of the world, the one created the world. And Dam, blood, on the other hand, is referring to excitement and energy, which is the opposite of acceptance. Because acceptance is just accept. So Adam, which we're named after, is the idea of Hashem, but then it's our personal excitement. And that's why Adam, it's interesting, is that the numerical value of Adam is actually 45, because Adam is Aleph and Dalet is 5, which is like the Hey, and you have the Mem. So you do have the Ma, the acceptance, the bittul in Adam, but it's only a gematria. And in other words, in gematria is a numerical value, so it's not the way it is in itself in a revealed state. But when it comes down into a gematria, you have that. Like Alter explains in Shayach Demun, the difference between when something is spelled clear in the name and it's through a gematria. And that's why it says, in the prophets, Ma Shmoi, what is the person's name? Ma Shem B'nai, what is the name of the child? In other words, the name is referring to Adam. That's the human being, which is only the gematria numerical value of Ma Bittul. But the name of the son was referring to the idea of what? A behema, which is the numerical value of Ban. So knows behema in the revealed state, it's the Shema. But if you do the numerical value, it actually is Nun Beis, which is not the name of Hashem's name, which also has obviously within it the name Ma. And the same thing also when it comes to Moshe Rabbeinu. As we know, Moshe Rabbeinu received the Torah from Hashem, and the fact is Moshe Rabbeinu's source is in Tohu. Moshe Rabbeinu's source is in the world of Tohu, and that's why, because he was in the world of chaos, that's why he couldn't speak. It was hard for him to speak, like it says, Chabad Pevakant Lashon, and like explained many places. And that's why also the name of Moshe Rabbeinu is Mem Shin Hey. So in other words, you also have in Moshe Rabbeinu the letters Mem and Hey of acceptance, and that's the whole power of the world of Tohu is Bittul, acceptance. Because the fact is, the world of Tohu is, why is it acceptance? Because the world of Tohu is totally unified and connected and cleaving with the source of the light. And therefore, what does Tohu want? Tohu just wants to connect to the source of light. And what is that? Why does someone want to accept the source of light? You're going to disappear, because that's the ultimate level of acceptance. Like the Alter explains in Tanya, that the nature of fire is, it wants to go higher. And it wants to cleave, and it wants to become one with its source. So why does the fire stay there? Because the wick is pulling it down, but the fire itself wants to go to the source. And that's why the light in the world of Tohu, it's an abundance of light. In other words, not only quantitatively but qualitatively abundance of light. What does it mean, qualitative light? Because basically it's cleaving and it's drawing itself to its source, and it totally wants to nullify its own ego. And the same thing also that's with the light of Tohu. But even the vessels of Tohu, which we know is very little vessels, it's also in the level of acceptance. In other words, it's not only quantitatively smaller vessels, but also qualitatively, because on the level of full acceptance. And here the Rebbe explains something very, very powerful and very revolutionary. He says like this: based on this, you can explain that's why initially the light was in the vessels in the world of Tohu. If the light of Tohu is so powerful, how is it able to go into the vessel? Because the fact is, in the world of Tohu, we said it's an abundance of light, quantitatively and qualitatively, and the vessel is very, very small. So how did it come into? How did it even go into the vessel? How originally, before it's busted, how did it even temporarily go into the vessel? And Rebbe explains, based on what we just learned, he can explain it beautifully. Why? Because what's the light of Tohu and the vessels of Tohu? It's ultimate acceptance. It's bittul. So therefore, when you're able to nullify yourself, you can have an abundance, infinite amount of light, even small vessels, and somehow it works its way out. So that's how initially it was able to connect. But on the other hand, the fact is, in the light of Tohu was a lot of light, and the vessels were very, very small. So therefore, ultimately, it pierced the vessels, and that's why we have the vessels that we're looking for today. You can possibly say this is the reason. Now, the source of Tohu is higher from the essential elevation, which is sourced in the essence of Hashem himself. And that's why it says, Vayimloich. What does it mean, the idea of a king? Because what is a king? The king's source is in the essence of the highest level of Hashem. And that's why, what's our avodah? What's our work over here today in this world? To elevate the sparks of Tohu. And it was to draw in and to reveal this powerful light and vessels of Tohu, and to go ahead and elevate it, because that's where the real power is. Okay. So in other words, to recap, what the Rebbe is saying is, what's our avodah? Our avodah is to go after those holy sparks. Now the holy sparks of Tohu, the reason why they're so powerful is because they have the level of acceptance, they have the level of bittul. Based on the Rebbe says, now we'll understand why it says, Ki chelek Hashem amoy, Yaakov nechav nachlosi. Why? Chelek Hashem amoy, the first half of the verse, is referring to the work of the godly soul. On its own, the godly soul is doing its work, which is basically Chelek Hashem. It's a part of Hashem. Chelek el kamim mamash. That's the first part of the work, the verse. Yaakov chelek nachlosi is referring to the work that the animal soul does. And where the godly soul gets involved in the animal soul, to transform it, to refine it, to purify it. And what are we trying to purify? The sparks of Tohu, which is in the animal soul. And as we know, like we learned before, that in the animal soul you have in a revealed way the ultimate acceptance of Tohu. So the first half of the verse is referring to the godly soul, the way it does its own, and not dealing with the physical world with the animal soul. And the second half is dealing with elevating the animal soul. And that's why it says, in the second half, Yaakov's name Yaakov. Why? Because Yaakov comes from the expression of the heel, which is the lowest level, which is referring to what? To the animal soul. And on the other hand, when you do the avodah dealing with the animal soul, you come to chevel nachlasai, which is basically the inheritance, which is basically transforming the sparks of Tohu, which we received as an inheritance. And we inherit the lights of Tohu, like it's explained elsewhere in places in Chassidut. And that's why it says nachlasai, an inheritance. What does that mean, nachlasai? It's our inheritance. And it doesn't say the inheritance of Yud Kei Vav Kei, like in the first part of the verse. Why? Because this level is actually higher than Yud Kei Vav Kei, which it's higher than the four letters of the Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, and even higher than the dot on top of the Yud. Why? Because the soul, the way it's on high, it says Chai Hashem Asher Mantel Lifanav, that he's standing much higher. But after it comes down to this world and transform the animal soul, it actually goes even higher than Yud Kei Vav Kei. And that's why it doesn't say in the second half of the verse Yud Kei Vav Kei. And that's why it says afterwards Yimtze'eyu, he is found be'eretz midbar, in the desert. Why? Because this revelation comes, if you want to reach higher than Yud Kei Vav Kei, you want to reach the essence of Hashem, you reach that by going out to the desert to transform the sparks of the world of Tohu. And why is it called you found it? I just happened to find it. Because drawing in this level is you're coming to a much higher level of Seder Stalshlus. You're much higher than any level you can reach. And that's why it says when the Messiah comes, he's also going to come just boom out of the blue. Why? Like it says, the verse says clearly, Matzasi David Avdi. I found my servant King David. Because the revelation of Mashiach is going to be not based on a certain flow or a certain strategy or a certain systematic approach. And this revelation happens by doing what? You want to have the highest revelations? Transforming the physical world. And that's why the Mashiach is going to come and he's going to conquer the 7 nations, the 70 nations, and the 7 nations, which is the source of the 7 nations. And also the land of Keni, Knizi, Kanoini, because we're going to have not only the transformation of the seven nations, which is the source of the 70, which is the emotions, but also the transformation of the intellectual spirit as well. And that's why the verse continues on to say, Kenesha Yori Kinoi, which we said is the highest level of compassion, which is above a Shalshas. Why? Because when you come down to the world to elevate the sparks of Tohu, you're able to bring in the highest levels of compassion, even above the levels of Hishtalshut, the way things flow from one level to the next. And that's why it says afterwards, Hashem Badad Yanchenu, Hashem alone is going to rest there. What does that mean, Badad? It's referring to the 10 spheres which are hidden. Like it's explained in the Chassidic discourse of Eicha Yashua Badad, and that's why also the garments in Yom Kippur are made out of bigdei bad, out of linen. Because why? Because it's referring to a drawing down from a level of bad, the badad, which is higher than the shalshlus. So you're able to, on Yom Kippur, reach the highest level. And that's why it also says, Ve'ein imoy kel necha, there's no other nation, knows we're higher than the level of any angels. And like it says in the verse, Chelek Hashem Amrashi, that obviously the goal is Anon Nasa Malko, you want to connect to Hashem himself. Now, this, what we draw down in Yom Kippur, through the linen garments from the highest level, it comes down afterwards in the holiday of Sukkot, which is the holiday of being happy. Up until afterwards, the end of Sukkot, like it says also the idea of Ein Imo Keil Necha, there's no one else in the private party. Like the Medrash says clearly in reference to the holiday Shmini Atzeret, Hashem says, "Come, let's have a private party." And Hashem and the Jewish people, we're going to be together with Hashem Himself. And afterwards, after you finish this whole avodah of Yom Kippur, bringing down the highest level in the private party with Hashem, then we each go onto our ways. We take out all that we unpack all the package that we received in the month of Tishri for the whole year, and we'll come to the ultimate promise. We're going to have the Simchas Olam Al Roshim. We're going to have the everlasting, the infinite joy, and that's going to happen with the Gula Hamitis V'Ashlema, with the redemption, the true redemption, the complete redemption. It's going to happen, like Rebbe finished it up beautifully, B'Karov Mamish, very, very soon and very, very quickly. So here we have a beautiful Chassidic discourse about the ultimate power, why we're in this world, to transform those sparks, and by transforming the sparks, we reach the highest level, and those sparks are the sparks of bittul and acceptance. Let's hope and pray, like the Rebbe finished up the Chassidic discourse, we'll all merit by doing our work. With the coming of Mashiach, the next class will be in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. Have a great and blessed week. Shavua Tov and Chag Sameach.